I stumbled into this video about Europe, the fact that Europe is actually removing um, some people that they say they are not living up to their values. They have refused to adapt to the values of the Europe system and Europe in general. So apparently, some European countries have started to take decision on this, and they started deporting some people. So this is really came as a surprise because I never saw it coming. But obviously, they've done that. So I think let's watch this video together. Then we'll analyze it and see what is actually happening, because it is happening real life. It's happening and it is live and happening direct. Live and direct.
Hello friends, welcome back to the... Did you know that several European countries have now taken firm and controversial steps toward the Muslim immigrants living within their borders? What began as open-door policies has shifted dramatically, and some nations across Europe are now actively pressuring Muslim immigrants to leave. This sudden change has sparked intense debate around the world and raised serious questions about human rights, national identity, and the future of multiculturalism. And of course, many of you are wondering, which countries are making these decisions? Which governments have drawn the line and decided that Muslim immigrants must return to their home countries? We have prepared a complete list of 10 European nations that have implemented or pushed for these strict measures, and the details may surprise you. Stay with us, because this topic reveals a side of Europe that many people have never seen before. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this video so more people can join the discussion about what is really happening across Europe today. Number 1. France. Let us begin with the first country on this list. At number 1 is France, a nation long known for its proud motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Yet in recent years, France has moved toward much stricter migration policies, and these changes have directly impacted its Muslim community, which now numbers more than 6 million people as of the year 2025, according to updated demographic estimates. Many observers have even speculated that France has become increasingly influenced by Islam in the past decade, creating a climate of debate that grows sharper each year. Responding to rising concerns about extremist threats and a desire to preserve national identity, the French government has taken several significant steps. These include enforcing bans on visible religious symbols, such as the headscarf, in various public spaces, tightening oversight on religious institutions, and closely monitoring mosques considered suspicious. In a move that shocked the global community, France has closed more than 20 mosques under the justification of combating radicalisation. These actions are not isolated events, but part of a broader shift toward securitization, one that touches every aspect of immigrant life in the country. Unsurprisingly, these policies have sparked intense debate both inside France and around the world. Some people argue that such measures are necessary to maintain social cohesion, reduce tensions, and protect public safety. They believe that France, as a secular republic, has the right and responsibility to regulate visible religious expressions in order to preserve national unity. However, many others see the same policies as violations of fundamental freedoms that France has historically championed. To them, these restrictions erode trust, deepen divisions, and create an atmosphere of suspicion directed almost entirely at Muslim communities. This divide mirrors the immense challenge France faces today: how to balance its commitment to security with its long-held principles of human rights and equality. The ongoing tension highlights the difficult struggle the country endures as it tries to manage the complexities of a modern, pluralistic society while remaining faithful to its historical ideals. Every new regulation, surveillance effort, or mosque closure only intensifies the national conversation about identity, belonging, and what it truly means to be French in the 21st century. And so the key question remains: is France genuinely protecting its national identity, or is it risking the alienation of its own citizens by pushing these controversial measures forward? What do you think about France's decision to take such firm and heavily debated steps toward its Muslim population? Number 2, Belgium, a country where approximately 8% of the total population...
What do you think about France? Do you think they've adopted the right approach in stemming Islamist terrorists or those that are terrorizing their country out of their nations? What do you think? this might be controversial, but is an existential threat to most nations. The recent uprising and insurgency that is on the rise in most Western countries and even all over the world. Um, so, what do you think about France? Let's watch it.
Practices Islam as of the year 2025. This makes Belgium one of the nations with the highest percentages of Muslim residents in Western Europe. Yet despite its long-standing reputation as a symbol of European neutrality and cultural openness, Belgium has undergone a dramatic shift in its immigration stance over the past decade. After a series of extremist-related violent incidents shook the nation, Belgian authorities began tightening policies with unprecedented seriousness. The government has deported Muslims identified as radical or suspected of having ties to extremist networks, consistently justifying these actions as matters of national security. Officials argue that these measures are designed to prevent future attacks and protect citizens from ideological threats that they believe could destabilize the country. However, these decisions have created a deep divide in public opinion. While some Belgians view the crackdown as an essential step toward ensuring public safety and preventing radicalization, many others argue that the government's approach unfairly targets Muslim communities and fosters an atmosphere of fear. The controversy grows even more intense when looking at Belgium's restrictions on certain religious practices, including the banning of halal slaughter. For many Muslims, this policy feels like a direct assault on their identity and their right to uphold religious traditions. As tensions escalate, Belgium finds itself walking a very thin line. On one side lies the responsibility to maintain security in a complex and unpredictable global climate. On the other lies the obligation to respect individual freedoms and uphold the values of diversity and inclusion, values that once made Belgium a model of European multiculturalism. The tightening of immigration laws, combined with heightened surveillance and religious restrictions, has raised critical questions both within Belgium and abroad. These shifts have sparked protests, debates, and passionate discussions across the political spectrum. Critics say Belgium is losing sight of the principles that once defined it, arguing that the nation risks alienating its own residents by embracing policies that disproportionately impact one religious minority. Supporters counter that Belgium has no choice if it hopes to preserve national cohesion and prevent extremist ideology from taking root. This conflict highlights a broader struggle that many European nations face today, balancing the urgent need for security with the moral imperative to protect human rights. As Belgium continues to tighten its controls and enforce controversial policies, one pressing question demands attention. Is Belgium still a land of inclusion, or has it strayed too far from the path it once proudly walked? Number 3. Denmark. No.
Is your business struggling to repay a bounce back loan or a C-bills loan or a recovery loan scheme?
Known worldwide for its progressive values, strong welfare system, and reputation as one of the most stable democracies in Europe, Denmark has recently taken a surprising and hardline turn with its policies toward Muslim immigration. The shift caught global attention, especially as the country began enforcing some of the strictest regulations in the region. What many people do not realize is that the Danish government has introduced what is effectively a zero immigration rule for urban areas heavily populated by Muslims, neighborhoods often labeled by critics as ghettos or zones, described as chaotic, unsafe, and lacking social cohesion. These areas fall under a special legal category and face a wide range of strict regulations intended to reshape their demographic and cultural landscape. Among these measures are mandatory Danish language classes, compulsory cultural integration programs, and increased state monitoring of community activities. Danish officials insist that these policies are necessary, claiming they help immigrants integrate faster, reduce cultural isolation, and lower the risk of radicalization. According to them, firm intervention is the only way to prevent parallel societies from forming in the heart of Danish cities. However, many within the Muslim community see the policies very differently. To them, the approach feels forced, heavy-handed, and deeply alienating. Families often describe the pressure they feel to abandon core parts of their cultural identity simply to align with Danish norms. Some say the policies make them feel as though their traditions are viewed as inferior or unwelcome, intensifying frustration and distrust toward the government. Observers and human rights advocates also express concern. They argue that Denmark's aggressive strategy undermines personal freedoms, restricts cultural expression, and risks stigmatizing entire communities based solely on religious or ethnic background. This clash between state-enforced integration and individual freedom sits at the center of one of Denmark's most heated public debates. The Danish model highlights a growing tension, the struggle to promote social cohesion while still respecting cultural diversity. Denmark's approach raises difficult questions about identity, belonging, and how far a nation can go in shaping the behavior of its residents in the name of unity. Because of these controversies, Denmark has become one of the region's most intense battlegrounds for discussions about immigration, national values, and the limits of inclusion. If Denmark continues moving in this direction, the question remains, will these strict measures strengthen integration, or will they push communities even further apart? Number 4. Switzerland. Many might be surprised to see Switzerland here, given its long-standing image as a neutral, peaceful country.
But who could have thought that 2025, most of these European countries that were entitled neutral when it comes to the issue of immigration, or even for most of them, they supported immigrants, especially Muslim immigrants coming from Middle East and Northern Africa, especially. But who could have thought that eventually they will take a stand against this extremism that has come with some of these immigrants from these parts of the world? Who could have thought? This is really surprising.
Yet the evidence shows an increasingly hardline stance toward Muslim immigrants and religious expression within its borders. Back in 2009, the Swiss electorate voted to ban the construction of new mosque minarets, arguing that these architectural features conflicted with traditional Swiss cultural values. The decision stirred nationwide controversy and sparked a heated debate on whether Switzerland was preserving its identity or suppressing religious freedom under the guise of cultural preservation. In recent years, the government has gone further. Swiss authorities have stepped up deportations of Muslims, even in cases involving minor infractions, claiming the need to protect Swiss culture and national security. As of 2025, Muslims make up about 6% of Switzerland's total resident population aged 15 and older. Under these policies, the Muslim community now faces significantly tighter scrutiny. Mosques are under stricter surveillance, public expressions of faith are under regulation, and certain religious practices have become increasingly restricted. For many Muslims living in Switzerland, these measures feel less like security policies and more like systematic attempts to marginalize their faith and identity. Critics argue that such actions build an environment of distrust and social exclusion. Rather than fostering integration or mutual understanding, the policies risk turning Muslims, many of whom have lived in Switzerland for years or were even born there, into perpetual outsiders, people viewed as a problem to be managed rather than citizens to be included. At the same time, proponents of these measures insist that Switzerland merely protects its long-standing traditions and cultural cohesion. They argue that in a
Did you hear what the guy said? He said that people view some of those Muslims as a problem to be managed rather than citizens to be included. Wow, that's really bad. That type of impression is really degrading. For them to see people now, some of these Islamic Muslim terror extremists, as a problem to be managed, I think that goes a long way. It says a lot about what extremism has done to the entire world. Yes, some of these Muslims are wonderful people, they are beautiful people, but for the few ones that are extremists, what they do is damaging. It's damaging to families, to people, to economies, to nations. So I think that has brought about all these exigencies from these Western nations. It's a case of survival now for them.
diverse society, it is reasonable to enforce limits on religious displays that might challenge societal norms or spark social friction. From their perspective, these actions are not aimed at persecuting religion, but at preserving social harmony and national stability. Thus, Switzerland finds itself at a crossroads between tradition and pluralism, between preserving identity and upholding freedom of belief. The debate continues. Is Switzerland safeguarding its heritage or jeopardizing the rights of a religious minority by pushing them to the margins? Number 5. Austria. In recent years, Austria has adopted a markedly stricter stance toward Muslim immigration, a shift that has reshaped public life, policy, and social dynamics across the country. The Austrian government introduced laws aimed at regulating foreign funding of Islamic organizations and began applying increased scrutiny to most Muslim religious activities. They argue these measures are necessary to combat extremism and to encourage integration into Austrian society. In practice, Mosques and Islamic community centers face tighter oversight, and external financial support, especially from abroad, has been severely restricted or altogether banned. Many Austrians applaud these policies. They believe that immigrants, regardless of faith, should respect and accept local customs and social norms as a condition of living in Austria. From this viewpoint, ensuring cultural cohesion and national identity requires that newcomers align with mainstream values rather than maintain separate social enclaves. However, human rights advocates and members of the Muslim community sharply criticize these measures as discriminatory and repressive. They argue that limiting foreign funding, restricting religious organization autonomy, and scrutinizing everyday religious practices amounts to an infringement on religious freedom. For many Muslims living in Austria, what is framed as integration feels more like enforced assimilation. These policies have sparked growing tension. Austria's rigorous migration strategy and strict regulation of Muslim religious life raise serious questions. Is the state protecting cultural harmony or overstepping the boundaries of diversity and inclusion? Is it safeguarding stability or creating an atmosphere in which a religious minority feels systematically marginalized? The debate continues.
These questions being asked in this video, they are like a rhetoric. Is a question that does not actually require an answer, but it's one you need to reflect on. Is it a case of Austria or even these Western countries trying to marginalize the minority Muslims in their countries? Or is it a case of indeed national security because of the baggages and the arm and casualties that extremism bring? I think this is a question to ponder on because it's reverberating in all the countries, in all the Western countries, not only in Western countries, even in Africa. It's a question to actually reflect on.
Tense and unresolved, as Austria attempts to balance its claims of security and cultural integrity with the very principles of freedom and pluralism that have long formed part of European values. If you have thoughts about Austria's approach, whether you see it as necessary or unjust, leave your opinion in the comments. Share this video for broader discussion, and hit subscribe to follow more updates on this topic. Number 6. Netherlands. This country, once internationally praised for its deeply liberal values and its embrace of multiculturalism, has in recent years begun enforcing a series of restrictive measures targeting its Muslim population, marking a dramatic shift in policy and social atmosphere. One of the most controversial changes, religious garments such as the hijab have been banned in schools and public buildings. This ban directly affects Muslim women across the country. According to the most recent data from the Dutch Statistical Bureau, Muslims now constitute approximately 6% of the total population as of the year 2025. Beyond clothing restrictions, the Dutch authorities have placed mosque activities under heightened scrutiny. Officials cite growing concerns over potential radicalization as justification for this strict oversight. As a result, many Muslim communities say they face increased regulation, inspections, and constraints on religious gatherings and community funding. For many Muslims living in the Netherlands, these developments have triggered deep frustration. A growing number feel they are being discriminated against and hindered in their efforts to integrate into Dutch society. What was once celebrated as a society defined by freedom and inclusivity is being replaced, they feel, by policies that treat them as outsiders rather than fellow citizens. On the other hand, proponents of these policies argue that such measures are necessary to maintain public safety and national security. They claim that in an era of heightened global tensions, stricter regulation and oversight are justified. From their perspective, the Netherlands must safeguard its social cohesion and ensure that new generations respect the values and norms that have defined the country for decades. Yet critics point out that these restrictions erode the very civil liberties that made the Netherlands a model of tolerance. They warn that by limiting religious expression and singling out a specific minority, the country risks undermining its identity as an open, multicultural society. The result is a growing sense of alienation within the Muslim community and increasing polarization in society at large. For many, the Netherlands is no longer a safe haven of rights and freedoms, at least not for all.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is Base 44. This is a first look at the current industry-leading.
Number 7. Germany. Once known for opening its doors to over 1 million refugees in the year 2015, Germany has since shifted toward much stricter immigration policies. Those policies now make it easier to deport immigrants who are accused of crimes or who allegedly fail to meet national integration standards. The government defends these measures as necessary steps to safeguard national security and public order. Many supporters say these moves are justified. They argue that such laws help to preserve social stability and protect German cultural values from what they see as threats. According to the latest estimates, Germany's Muslim population reached approximately 5.5 million by 2025, amounting to about 6.6% of the total population. This community now finds itself under significant pressure, especially as authorities invoke failure to integrate or minor infractions as grounds for deportation. But critics and civil rights advocates insist this approach fosters a climate of distrust toward Muslim communities. They argue that these policies disproportionately affect people of faith and reinforce feelings of alienation rather than encouraging genuine integration. As a result, society in Germany appears increasingly divided. Many citizens support stricter immigration and enforcement, believing it essential for national cohesion, while others fear these policies undermine the basic rights and dignity of immigrants' rights once considered fundamental to a tolerant, democratic society. The welcoming spirit that defined Germany in 2015 seems to have given way to fierce, polarized debate over immigration, integration, and identity. The question many now ask is whether Germany has found a proper balance or whether it has lost sight of the humanitarian roots that once guided its refugee policy. Number 8. Greece. Greece, often the first stop for migrants entering Europe, has tightened its immigration policies in recent years, shifting from a transit point into a gate with far stricter controls. Crowded detention centers and extremely limited resources push the government to accelerate deportations and deny a growing number of asylum applications, many of which were filed by Muslim refugees. As a result, a humanitarian crisis has emerged across several Greek islands. Refugees often endure harsh, unstable conditions, living in overcrowded camps with inadequate shelter, sanitation, or access to basic services. Meanwhile, tensions between refugees and local populations are rising. A growing number of residents view migrants not as displaced human beings seeking refuge, but as an economic burden threatening scarce jobs, limited resources, and local infrastructure. The pressure on Greece creates a harsh dilemma. On one hand, the government must manage public sentiment and address legitimate concerns about social strain and security. On the other hand, the country bears moral and legal responsibilities to protect people fleeing war, persecution, or destitution. Efforts to reduce migrant inflow and expedite deportations reflect public demand for stability, yet the tightening measures come at the expense of individuals often traumatized, vulnerable, and in need of support. Over crowded detention camps, the voices of those denied asylum go unheard. Families remain trapped in limbo. Children grow up in uncertainty. Many ask, is this policy, built to protect national interests, gradually stripping away compassion and the promise of safe refuge that once drew thousands to Greece's shores? By denying so many asylum applications, increasing deportations, and refusing adequate aid and integration efforts, Greece is walking a precarious line between enforcing immigration laws and neglecting its humanitarian duties. The impact echoes across entire communities, not only among those forced to leave, but also among those who remain, fearful and marginalized. Will Greece succeed in finding a solution that balances compassion with practical burdens? Or will the current crisis deepen, leaving more families stranded, more lives broken, and more trust eroded on all sides? Number 9. Hungary. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Hungary has taken one of the toughest stances toward Muslim immigrants anywhere in Europe. Over the past decade, the government has reshaped national policy around the idea of protecting what it calls Hungarian Christian heritage, turning the country into one of the continent's most restrictive environments for migrants, especially those from Muslim-majority nations. Hungary has closed much of its southern border and constructed physical barriers specifically designed to block incoming refugees, most of them fleeing war, discrimination, or poverty in Muslim-majority regions. These fortified borders symbolize the country's hardened approach, sending a clear message that irregular migration will not be tolerated. Beyond physical barriers, Hungary has introduced legislation that criminalizes assistance to undocumented immigrants. This includes helping them file asylum applications or providing legal or humanitarian support. The government argues that these strict laws are necessary to prevent uncontrolled migration and to defend Hungary from what it views as the growing influence of Islam in Europe. As of 2025, Muslims make up less than 1% of Hungary's population, approximately 0.4% according to updated demographic estimates from Pew Research and Eurostat. Yet Orban maintains that even small demographic shifts could threaten national identity. Human rights organizations have strongly condemned these measures. They describe Hungary's policies as discriminatory, inhumane, and inconsistent with international asylum standards. Nevertheless, these policies remain widely popular among many Hungarians who believe their national identity, culture, and traditions are at risk. To them, Orban's actions are not discriminatory but necessary a defense against cultural dilution and social instability. However, Hungary's hardline approach often clashes with the broader migration framework of the European Union.
But to think of the fact that as much as the world is having migration crisis, people are moving from one place to another, especially from the developing countries or the third world countries to the developed countries. As bad enough as we have that migration problem in our hands, but it's worse now to the fact that it's coupled with religious extremism, such that most of these countries would have perhaps tried to bring in as many refugees and immigrants as possible, but they are now, turning the other blind eye because of the crisis and the extremism that most of these refugees bring onto their shores, especially those from Muslim dominated countries. It's really it's heartbreaking. To fighting two problems at the same time: problem of immigration and then problem of Islamic extremism.
Brussels has repeatedly criticized Hungary for refusing to share responsibility in accepting asylum seekers and for enacting laws that contradict European norms on human rights and refugee protection. These clashes highlight a deeper divide within Europe regarding how to handle migration and how to balance cultural preservation with humanitarian obligations. As the debate continues, Hungary stands as a powerful symbol of the continent's internal struggle. Supporters view the country as bravely defending its heritage. Critics see it as shutting the door to diversity and abandoning Europe's moral commitments. The tension reflects a broader question facing the entire continent. Number 10. Italy. In recent years, Italy has adopted much stricter immigration policies, particularly toward Muslim immigrants, driven heavily by pressure from nationalist and populist political parties. These political forces have pushed the government to tighten regulations, restrict access to public services for Muslim migrants, and increase deportations for those deemed unable to integrate. Once known as a multicultural Mediterranean crossroads, Italy has shifted decisively. Its coastline, historically one of the main gateways for migrants crossing the Mediterranean Sea, is now tightly controlled, with naval patrols, migrant deterrence operations, and cooperative agreements aimed at preventing boats from reaching Italian shores. As of the year 2025, Italy is home to approximately 2.9 million Muslims, representing about 4.9% of its total population, according to updated data from Pew Research and the Italian National Institute of Statistics. Despite this relatively small share, public opinion has changed dramatically. A growing segment of Italian citizens now views immigration as a direct threat to national identity, cultural cohesion, and economic stability. These rising fears have fueled stricter policies. Muslim migrants face increasing barriers to permanent residency, tighter scrutiny over integration requirements, and reduced access to certain social programs. Deportations have climbed, especially in cases where authorities argue that individuals pose security risks or have failed to demonstrate sufficient cultural assimilation. Supporters of these measures say Italy must protect its borders and preserve its cultural heritage in a rapidly changing Europe. Critics counter that the country is abandoning its historical spirit of hospitality and diversity values that once defined the Italian identity. The clash between
One interesting thing about Italy's approach is the fact that they are using three approaches, which is externalize, criminalize, and legalize. By externalizing as much as possible, they've signed partnership agreements with neighboring countries like Tunisia, Albania, such that those ones will prevent the migrants or asylum seekers from moving across the sea, which means they will not go beyond Tunisia, Albania. Italy pays for this every year. So even if you're not eventually coming, that's if externalization fails, they criminalize the fact that you're now in as an illegal immigrant. It's now criminalized and then legalized by the law. So it's no longer business as usual. for them to even criminalize the act of coming to their countries illegally, it shows you the extent to which these Western countries are willing to go, because it's an existential threat this time. Everybody wants to survive, and they call it's a case of national security when people come into their own ideologies and beliefs. So that's a lot of baggage for countries to deal with.
Between these perspectives has created deep national divisions. Italy now grapples with a difficult question. Is it redefining its values to safeguard the future, or is it slowly losing the welcoming spirit that shaped its cultural legacy? The effects of these policies continue to unfold, and their long-term impact on Italy's identity remains uncertain. What do you think?
So that is it. What do you think about all this information that we have? These countries are obviously not smiling with asylum seekers and immigrants, especially those from Muslim-dominated nations. Um, Terrorism and extremism has done worse for the world than good. Because, and I don't what the part that actually it's appalling to me is the fact that if you don't like a people, you don't like them, especially if you don't like those from the West, and maybe you are coming from the Middle East or from an Islamic dominated country, then why do you go there? I thought if you don't like people, you keep away from them, but you still go to their countries because their countries come lots of goodies. But when you go there, then you definitely need to abide by their laws, their ethics, their ethos. But instead, you get there and you want to impose your own beliefs and ideologies, which is totally contrary to what they have. The fact is that the laws of any country is supreme to whatever ideologies or ideas that your beliefs might come with. So if you are going into a nation, wherever it is in the world, you should be ready to bow to the supremacy of the law and not to the ideologies you believe. Thank you for watching and endeavor to subscribe. See you on my next one. Cheers.